You check your account, not because something is wrong, but because it feels like something should be better by now. Same balance, same routine, same life. And you tell yourself, this is fine. I'm being responsible. But here's where it starts to break, because the habits that feel safe are often the exact reason nothing changes. And you don't notice it. Not at first. You just keep going. Paycheck in, expenses out. A little saved, a little spent. Normal, too normal. And that's the problem, because while you feel stable, something invisible is happening underneath it. Slowly, quietly. And by the time you notice it, you're not behind. You're trapped in a version of life that looks correct, but doesn't grow. But the real question is this. What if your biggest financial losses aren't big decisions, but small habits you stopped questioning? And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Let's start. Top 10. The comfort subscription life. You don't feel like you're overspending because nothing feels extreme. A few subscriptions here, a few upgrades there. Everything is just a small monthly cost. That's how it always starts. But here's what changes slowly. You stop buying things once. You start renting your entire lifestyle. And it feels smart because it's manageable. But every small fee is actually a silent commitment, a fixed drain. And the danger isn't the price. It's the permanence. Because canceling doesn't feel like saving money. It feels like losing access to your identity. So you don't cancel. You adjust your life around it instead. And here's the question that builds underneath it. How many parts of your life are you still paying for? Even when they stopped adding value months ago? And you don't answer that immediately, because the number is uncomfortable. So you move on, without fixing it. Top 9. Lifestyle inflation disguised as progress. Something improves in your life. A raise, a better job, a small win, and you feel it instantly. You've earned this, so your spending adjusts quietly. Better food, better phone, better comfort. Nothing dramatic, just matching your level. But here's where it shifts without warning. Your income rises once, your lifestyle rises permanently, and now every future raise is already pre-spent. You don't feel richer, you feel the same, just with slightly more expensive pressure. And the illusion is powerful. Because your life looks upgraded, but your freedom didn't move at all. It stayed locked. And the hidden question forms here. If your income disappeared today, how much of your current life would collapse immediately? And that question doesn't feel theoretical. It feels close. So you push it aside. Top 8. The emergency you plan to handle later. You don't ignore emergencies. You just postpone preparing for them. Because nothing urgent is happening right now. So you tell yourself, I'll build savings properly next month. But next month has a pattern. It always arrives with new expenses. And here's what quietly develops. You're not unprepared by accident. You're unprepared by delay. And delay feels harmless until it isn't. Because when something unexpected happens, you don't make financial decisions. You make panic decisions, and panic always costs more. Not because you are careless, but because urgency removes options. And this is where the real realization starts forming. What would happen if a financial shock hit your life tomorrow, and your only strategy was hope? And you don't like how realistic that sounds, so you keep moving. Top 7. The small debt you normalize. It doesn't feel like debt anymore. It feels like monthly noise. A balance, a minimum payment, a system. At first it was temporary, now it's background. And that's the danger, because normalized debt stops feeling like a problem and starts feeling like a feature of life. But something subtle changes over time. You stop asking how to eliminate it and start asking how to manage it. And management becomes acceptance, and acceptance becomes permanence. Here's the uncomfortable shift. Every month you stay in that cycle, you are not just paying money. You are paying future freedom for present stability. And the question appears slowly. What part of your income is already living in tomorrow's payments? You don't calculate it, because you already feel it. Top 6. Escalation spike. You think you're building wealth. But most people aren't building wealth. They are building systems that require them to keep working. And that difference is invisible until it isn't. Because nothing feels wrong day to day. That's what makes it dangerous. You wake up, you earn, you spend, you repeat. And it feels like progress, but it might just be maintenance. And here's the breaking point thought. If you stopped working for 3 months, how much of your life would still survive without collapsing? That question doesn't feel financial anymore. It feels personal. And you don't fully answer it, because it starts to expose something deeper. This was never about money. It was never about saving. It was never about investing. It's about something quieter, more uncomfortable. The version of you that keeps choosing stability over leverage, safety over expansion, comfort over uncertainty. Again, and again, and again. And at some point, that stops being a financial behavior. It becomes identity, not what you do, what you accept. And that realization doesn't ask for action. It just sits there. Heavy. Top 5. The invisible fee of convenience. Everything is easier now. Faster payments, instant delivery, one-click decisions. It feels like progress, but convenience has a price you don't see immediately. Because convenience removes friction, and friction used to protect your money. Now everything is effortless. So spending becomes automatic, not intentional. And here's the shift. You don't feel purchases anymore. You just experience outcomes. And when spending stops feeling real, control starts dissolving quietly. So the question becomes, how much of your financial life is happening without you actively choosing it? And that question lingers longer than expected. Top 4, the identity spending loop. You don't buy things because you need them. You buy them because they reinforce who you think you are. Successful, growing, improving. Even when the numbers don't fully match the identity, so spending becomes emotional alignment, not financial decision-making. And this is where it becomes subtle, because every purchase feels justified in isolation. But together, they form a pattern, a loop, a quiet identity tax. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You are not just spending money. You are maintaining a version of yourself that requires constant funding. And the question hits deeper now. What part of your lifestyle exists only to preserve an image of progress? Top 3, escalation spike. At some point, it stops being about mistakes and starts being about momentum, because these patterns don't feel wrong while they're forming. They feel normal, responsible, even smart, until you try to change them, and suddenly everything resists. Not externally, internally, because the system you built protects itself. And that's when you realize something sharper. You are not fighting bad decisions. You are fighting a life that has already been structured around them. And that's harder to escape than most people admit. Top 2, the time cost you never see. Money loss is visible, time loss is not. And that's why it's more dangerous. Because you don't notice what didn't happen. The investments you didn't make, the skills you didn't build, the compounding that didn't start. It all feels invisible until you compare versions of yourself. And suddenly time becomes the real currency. Not income, not savings. And the realization hits quietly. You are not just spending money to live. You are spending time to delay decisions that require discomfort. And time doesn't return. Top 1, the silent financial drift. This is the one no one notices while it's happening. Because nothing breaks, nothing fails, nothing collapses. Instead, everything slowly shifts. A little more spending, a little less saving, a little more delay, a little less clarity. And over time, you don't end up in a crisis. You end up in a version of life you didn't explicitly choose. It just formed. And here's the hardest truth. Most financial situations are not created by one decision. They are created by thousands of unchallenged ones. Small, repeated, invisible, until they define everything. And now the question is no longer about money. It's about direction. Where exactly is your life drifting? While you are convinced you are in control, the uncomfortable part isn't that these patterns exist. It's that they feel normal while they're building. That's the illusion. Nothing dramatic, no warning, just quiet continuation. And at some point, continuation becomes direction. But here's the part most people miss. Awareness doesn't fix anything immediately, but it breaks the illusion that nothing is happening. And once that illusion breaks, you start noticing what was always there. And now the question isn't what you should stop doing. It's what you've already been building without realizing it. Because there's another layer underneath this. A deeper system. A more hidden set of traps that look like progress, but operate even more quietly. And that's where the next layer begins. Top 10 financial traps that look like progress.